So, welcome back to Third Age Reforged and to another battle replay, and we make a return to TOL FALAS today. It actually wasn't going to be for another couple of weeks I was going to show this one, however, I have to record this one today because it has come to my attention that as I have transitioned over to the new PC for my recordings, I may have got the base download of Reforged from the ModDB, but I don't have any of the map packs or any of the additional maps and bits and pieces that have been released since the last patch was a thing. I can only imagine that piecing all of those together so that I am compatible with some of the replays that I have yet to do is going to be a genuine nightmare, but certainly not impossible. I'll be going through that at a later date, however, and not today, as I was ready to sit down and do some recording. Fortunately, TOL FALAS is not one of those maps. It was in the base download of the last patch, which was released in 2020, which gives you an idea of how long ago it was. But yes, TOL FALAS. It has been a while since we've seen TOL FALAS, but it is a map that we've seen time and time again. It's obviously one of the classic maps that I've always enjoyed looking at replays on, because there is a good amount of variation. I mean, there has been the danger in the past of it working out in a similar way, and that largely depends on how the defenders want to set up. If they want to set up on that hill, across those bridges and on the choke point on the other side, then it tends to work out in a similar way each time. We'll see if that proves to be the case this time around. There is the summit of the hill, which you can already see some of the runic defenders on. There is something of a theme here, and that is, Rhun have decided to shake off their evil yoke and march alongside the elves and the Numenorians, and the dwarves, consequently, have also decided that they're going to be evil, both Khazad and Erebor, marching alongside Mordor and their minions today on the attack. So we'll go through the attacking armies first and foremost, why not? Starting off with Vader 25, who is playing as Khazad with their Legion Bodyguard way back down over here. I think that's just because they forgot to be moved, the Legion Bodyguard. The most ordinary of all of the Dwarven bodyguards for Khazad. They're still very, very strong, however, but yeah, the rest of the army over here, Khazad with their high quality, even with less money to work with. If they're a smaller army, they're still going to have that quality which will help the attackers. But even their rank and file units are actually very good, although it very much looks like Mr. Vader here has decided to go for a very quality heavy approach, even with him being on the attack. This is dangerous because if you do end up getting bottled up, it doesn't matter how strong your individual Khazad units are, you're going to be facing off against the likes of Numenor and Imladris, and even the armor piercing of Rhun, when they're given enough money, can prove to be a real problem for the dwarves. So yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure if I agree with this. I mean, he's armor upgraded these Legion units as well, 2nd Legion, 4th Legion. He's gone for 2 units of Khazad Reclaimers. All of his bodyguard units are on display as well, the armor piercing guards of Khazad, the 3 HP Mithril Guard, which is where Balin himself is, the very expensive but very strong 1st Legion Pikes, and then further up we've got some more 2nd Legion, some more 4th Legion, and a couple of units of the Locked Morale Hammers of Gundabad. I think they're a must-have if you're on the attack as Khazad, because even if you do start to struggle, the Hammers of Gundabad will continue fighting to the bitter end, maybe give you a little bit of opportunity to get some reinforcements for. But this is a bold move. I mean, this is a lot of quality. If you can embed this into the other attacking armies, provided they've gone numbers heavy, this could work out very nicely for the attackers, but it very much depends. I mean, for a start, we've got Winged Swordsman 44, who's having this battle replay, who's playing as Mordor. It looks as though not a hugely quantity heavy build here either, which could prove to be a bit of a problem if they're hoping to bounce off Khazad a little bit. There are some Orc Fodder and Orc Javelins to pad out the numbers, both in melee and of course with those cheap Javelins. There are some around on infantry as well, 3 units of them, but the rest of the units here you can see are all going to be ever more expensive. The armor piercing Sauron's Will. The Blackguard of Barad-dûr can be very, very useful, but again, they need a good amount of units to pour in behind them. Whether the attackers have the numbers to do that or not remains to be seen. Minas Morgul Chosen are very solid, but also somewhat expensive heavy spears. They're not really built for not really designed to do damage to enemy infantry. They're more designed to withstand a lot of punishment in that regard. And then we have all of the bodyguard units for Mordor, which is the Olakai, the Uruk Captains, and then both temple units either side of the Nazgul. This is a very expensive endeavour again. I could understand one of Mordor or Khazad engaging in this sort of build, but the fact that both of them have, I mean, if I were the defenders, I would be very pleased by that. We'll see. Then we have Sanket, who is playing as Umbar. Umbar, another fairly quality-centric faction, to be honest, with Balagar Archers, Although it looks to be fair amount of Balagai units, the Naryn Arivor Guard, the Arden Iron, Corsair Infantry either side, there's the Harbingers of Castamere here as well. We've got the Balakith Axe Guard and more Naryn Aru units. I mean, you can see the quality that Umbar kind of have to spec into a little bit here, with Balagai Archers again, more Alcarondas Legion over on the hill over here, and some more Corsair Infantry, but even here you can see they probably have a more units than Mordor, maybe not more numbers because the Orc Javelins and Orc Fodder do skew that a little bit, but still, I mean, it's not the biggest army either, so we shall see if anyone indeed has decided to go for the numbers heavy approach. We have Angmar, played by Darthy Darth, who has got a lot of Angmar Marauders, got some Gundabad Guard. This looks a little bit more numbers heavy, and Angmar in general have got the survivability and stuff, like their Guardians of Kharndoon armour upgraded as well, and Gundabad Guard to be able to really sustain an attack for a long period of time. Lots of heavy armour on the attack today. I think all of the factions actually that are on the attack are going to be somewhat reliant on that. Trolls of Angmar, Trolls of Gundabad, 2 units of Trolls is fairly expensive. Blackwatch Legion, basically the stronger version of the Blackguard of Barad-dûr we've already seen. And then Witch Realm Blackguard and Witch Realm Hammer Guard as well. So I mean, not a cheap army, but maybe a little bit more numerous, and yeah, you can see Sniper Stalkers and Orc Fellas also hidden, so a more numbers heavy approach from Angmar. That they're going to be crossing the bridges, marching in step with the other fallen dwarves, played by Swadian-born, who is going to be playing as Erebor, on a quest for butter. We have the 3 Ironfoot Spears, who are going to be moving across the bridges first, some Highborns of Erebor just in behind them as well, Ironfoot Warriors, so the Ironfoots, dependable as ever. We've got the Erebor Legionaries with the Shock Infantry just in behind them, the Axe Guard of Erebor and the Mighty Sons of Durin. Again, a lot of bodyguard units here, this is very expensive. Dragon Slayers, Obsidian Guard, and then 2 units, actually no, 1 unit of Erebor Legionaries and a unit of Axe Throwers as well, very good at busting through phalanxes of course, but I don't know, this is a very quality heavy attack which could end up paying real dividends, or if they end up getting stuck in these choke points, it could end up being a very painful day at the office for them. Now then, Proxima Centuri, who is playing as Rhun, this armour piercing that they traffic in is going to be very useful against all of the attackers today. At range, very strong crossbowmen, especially given the elevation that TOL offers, are going to be very useful. The armour upgrade will prevent any enemy archers from battering them too hard as well. Some Naryn also up here just for some extra archer support. The rest of the runic army, interestingly enough, already getting into a defensive position over here. Like I said, armor piercing going to be very useful. The Gamperim also combine that with being a good phalanx unit, being an Halberdier. And Scion Rim, very similar to the Minas Morgul Chosen we've already seen, and the Arden Iron Shield Guard, a very heavy unit of spears, which are going to be good for holding the line. That is still going to be very necessary for the defenders, of course. They're going to need this expertise on the front line. Khamûl's Chosen, obviously the old model for them. The new model in the next match looks fantastic. They look very good here as well, but the new model really does complete them, I think. The Khamûl's Chosen, as far as a bodyguard unit goes, are relatively unremarkable, but a multiple HP sword and board unit is still nothing to be sniffed at. 2 more units of Nar Rim, another unit of Gamperim alongside another unit of Scion Rim. That's Imladris. The rest of the runic army is up here. The Dragon's Wrath crossbows, who in this version of the game, of course, is still a body-piercing crossbow unit. Very, very deadly. Got some Eastron crossbowmen. The Dragon's Breath, which the crew is very strong. The cannon itself is more useful for dealing with walls in quick order. I don't know if it's going to be terribly useful here, and it's very expensive, so I don't know. It could prove to be useful, we shall see. And there may very well be Khamûl's units, of course, which can hide, including the dangerous shadow bows. Diego Rio Ramos is playing as Imladris today. When you have a lot of money to play with, Imladris can be a very fun faction indeed. Plenty of Swords of Rivendell and Archers of Rivendell, all upgraded. The Gwythi Rockdor, and there wasn't a great deal of cavalry, you'd have to say, on the attacking side. They couldn't afford to bring cavalry as well as all of the very decadent bodyguard units they've already brought, so the Gwythi Rockdor could prove to be a very strong unit indeed. Gwythi Arthander in there, Imladris Guardians with the armour upgrade, Imladris Sentries, a fantastic unit of pikes of course. There are some Broinen Riverwards in there, various types of Elder Enway, spears most notably. And the Gwythi Myrdain are in there as well, so pretty much everything you would expect from Imladris when they have all of this money to spend. And last, but by no means least, we have Numenor, who are also in a great big blob, so it's going to be difficult to differentiate a lot of their units, played by Tuck the Gamer. He has got some Numenorian steel bows, he's got some Seafarers. I mean, Numenor, their roster isn't the biggest, and when they have a lot of money, you can always infer what they're going to bring as well. Plenty of the Numenorian steel bows, cohorts, and shield guard. Obviously the cohort fantastic at dealing with lightly armoured units, the shield guard, armour-piercing spears, plenty of seafarers for doing damage quickly. They have the Naru units, which they share of course with their opposite numbers in Umbar. Then they have the Royal Legion of Armenelos. You can see the Pharazim Swordmasters are scattered throughout this army as well. And that's pretty much it. There may be some shadow bows as well. We'll have to wait and see when they arrive. So this is going to be an interesting one. I actually rate the defenders' chances a little bit more highly than I otherwise would, as long as they choose the ground wisely. They should be able to bottle up these attacking forces without fear of being overrun too much, and stuff like the Dragon's Breath crossbows, the potential for the Ardenheim shadow bows and Kharmul's shadow bows as well. This could be a battle where they prove to be far too much for the attackers to deal with only Angmar really going for a numbers heavy approach, which is rare enough, but that quality that the attackers have does mean the defenders can't rely on their own quality units quite so much, so it's a little bit different here. There is going to be a cut, as always, because the defenders are not going to be defending from the front out in the villages, which is probably for the best, but we will be making a cut and we'll be rejoining when the battle is about to be joined. So things are actually getting underway in a way that I most certainly did not expect. Tuck the Gamer here firing away with his Ardenheim shadow bows, and Sanket getting far too close to the front line with a very important unit. Even to the attackers, Rangers can be such an important tool, and Castamir's Rangers getting far too greedy there and getting engaged by a unit of Numenorian Shield Guard, a battle for which they are most certainly not prepared. However, Winged Swordsman is on hand here to render a bit of assistance, and honestly, absorbing Ranger ammunition with a single unit of heavy spears from the front, it's still going to do a lot of damage even to the Minas Morgul's Chosen, but it is actually worth taking, I think, especially with a bit of friendly fire in there as well. And I think Winged Swordsman does sense this a little bit, which is why he's going to try and engage. The Olad Kai coming in as well. There's a few chunkier projectiles coming in from the Numenorian steel bows, so maybe a little bit of inexperience here, a little bit of panic at the first sight of the enemy by dumping a lot of your projectiles into them. And Numenor don't really have a lot of ammunition to go around. A lot of it is very effective, but you need to be quite careful with how you utilise it, and also the committal of a unit as strong as the Royal Legion in these early stages is also an interesting little aside. But with the armour piercing that the Shield Guard have, with the backing of the Royal Legion of Armanelos and more Shield Guard in behind, this initial assault is going to be thrown off fairly quickly, you would suggest. So now that things are underway, it is incumbent really on the attackers to keep things underway, as it were. Certainly not shy in sending forward some elite units here, Winged Swordsman, with Uruk captains also making their way to the front, an armour piercing bodyguard unit, but in doing so they are going to be exposed to the horrors of Ranger arrows. They are going to fall back a little bit now, but already bloodied. Not many of them dead, but certainly they will be wounded either way. We're still firing away. There is of course the presence of the runic dragon's fire up on the hill as well. I don't know how easy a shot it's actually going to be. They're probably going to need to use their cannons sooner rather than later, because as soon as Numenor pull back, the Angmar is really on its side. Shadowbones moving back. Maybe now Numenor trying to retreat to a more advantageous position. This does mean they're going to have to leave that unit of Shield Guard behind as a rear guard, as they pull their Royal Legion back as well. So this is a rather interesting first engagement. Unfortunate friendly fire there actually from the Dragon's Breath, and that should be enough to get around the Shield Guard, and what's left of them is going to be bulldozed by units of Blackguard of Barad-dûr. No great danger for them at the hands of enemy arrow fire either, with those big heavy shields that they have in their left hand. Well, you can see here Angmar the ones taking the lead, but a bit of sallying forth action from the Gwaithir Rockjaw charging into the huge mass of Angmar marauders and managing to do a good amount of damage to them as well. Like I said in the composition phase, Angmar can withstand this kind of loss more so than any of the other attackers today, based on the quality heavy build the attackers have decided to run with. There's a lot of sniper stalkers. It is going to be Imladris taking the lead over here, which is perhaps why Rhun didn't post up initially over on this side, but a combination of Imladris sentries and Swords of Rivendell, more than enough to deal with the very basic unit support that Angmar can throw at them. Forward comes some trolls. The close proximity of heavy elven swordsmen though would suggest that this isn't going to go too well, even with trolls. I mean, trolls are one of the best ways, I suppose, for Angmar to deal with the Imladris pikes. What sort of arrow fire is that? Numenor warriors? Numenor warriors also firing away into the approaching reinforcements. I mean, you can see the amount of damage here that Angmar have taken on the advance. It has been an arduous push forward as a result of the cavalry and the archers up on the hill. Angmar are better placed than most to deal with this sort of thing, but there does come a point where the losses become rather unsustainable. The dwarves also making their way across. Again, the dwarves better than most at dealing with this sort of arrow fire, but there is a limit to what armour and shields is going to do to you when it comes to that volume of projectile. But the amount of Angmar forces that are pressurising Imladris here, more reinforcements certainly going to be required. Interesting to see, actually, the forces of Umbar making their way across this the bridges, which is something we seldom see, because it is quite risky. Getting reinforcements across the bridges to keep your attack going is quite difficult, and when you're over here, you are very much in the defender's domain, and units like the Rhun here taking good advantage of the positions that they have to work with. Combination of Scion Rim and Gamp Rim holding things down from the front. The armour piercing from those halberds very useful against the Umbar forces that move forward, but it's not necessarily the worst thing to do. Good amount of pressure coming in from multiple angles here. This is a long battle as well, so I'm actually quite surprised with how forthright the attackers have been so far, because that would usually lead either through victory or defeat at quicker ends to the battle. Yeah, this is a bit of a marathon. Seafarers and Nindalos presumably have used their javelins and now moved in. Khazad rendering a little bit of assistance now to the forces of Mordor as they move forward. The fallen dwarves on both fronts. There must be riches aplenty on FALAS for them to have been stirred so. The hammers here. I mean, the hammers of Gundabad will be a very good unit for dealing with these high-end Numenorians. As much as the Numenorian spears have got armour piercing to give in return, they are not locked morale where the hammers of Gundabad are, and the hammers of Gundabad have got far higher baseline offensive stats. And also with a unit as strong as the Temple Executioners moving in as well. I guess Mordor don't really have a choice but to send forward elite units more liberally because of the high quality build that Winged Swordsman has elected to go with. Further back down the hill we can see some more javelins maybe making their way forwards. Umbar taking sole responsibility for the push across the river. Again though, Rhun are in a good position to take full advantage of this with Rim there. Sapphire Bladesmen will have been doing their thing. Narina Royal Guard are good at absorbing damage actually, so I think Umbar would actually prefer the Rim to be shooting at the Narina Royal Guard here in this case, and allowing their infantry a little bit more room. And you can see here the Alpha West Legion, I was going to say victory seems at certainty was a little bit optimistic I think, but they're doing quite well. I mean, they will have the better of something like Scion Rim in a really long fight, but it's going to be the Gamp Rim support coming in, which is the important thing here. There's a decent clutch of Umbar units, however. I mean, this is a risky move, but for Sanka it could really end up paying off. It's got a decent clutch of units. More reinforcements are on the way as well, so there's going to be no let-up here. Corsair infantry. Honestly, Rhun would be better off trying to just completely ignore the Umbar archers and continue to shoot into the infantry, because if they can do that, especially with their fire projectiles, the Balagai units will rout. That'll leave the Alpha Wondash units exposed. Before the reinforcements arrive, there's more Balagai footmen pushing across now, but I like this. An attack on more than just this hill over here and more than just the choke point on the other side. Here comes the Dragon's Breath with its bouncing projectile. Not a huge amount of damage there. I mean, it is a very weird artillery piece. It looks very intimidating, but it's actually not as deadly. Especially in this situation, as you might think. It's much better at easily and efficiently dealing with walled settlements where you have destructible walls. It's Numenor and steel bows waiting in the background. I mean, they are here in the ascendancy, the attackers. They are pushing Numenor back, and the quicker they can do this, the quicker they can move to Umbar's aid and push the defenders back into the settlement. And I mean, the attackers are definitely being extremely aggressive. And they are also pushing Imladris onto the back foot. I mean, this is going to be costly in the long run for the attackers, surely, because this assault so far has been fairly unrelenting. Their great hope will be that the defenders simply don't have enough to withstand this assault consistently. But if the defenders do manage to halt this momentum, things could get quite ugly for the attackers. I am very much in favour of this extremely aggressive approach, but whether it actually pans out the way they're hoping for, I'm not sure. It's just one unit of Elder Enway. I mean, I'm not sure Diego knows how best to approach this situation. I mean, all of the reinforcements that maybe would be helping that Elder Enway unit out are being blocked by the Witcher and Blackguard, who have also pushed forward very aggressively. Plenty of Elder Enway, plenty of Imladris Guardians. The Blackguard are a stretched unit at this point. You have to say, it's been a bloody affair from both sides thus far. Lancer forces even. Again, it's surprising considering the level of Imladris unit which is Guardian was chosen. Like the Arthand with Imladris Sentry should be one of the most solid frontline you can have. It's not the most organised, you would have to say, but surely over a longer period of time they're going to struggle a little bit more. God Helene firing down. They do have their Silverthorn arrows, of course, so that will mess with the momentum of the attackers just a little bit. Blackguard taking some good hits. There's a lot of ranged units up here, which, considering how aggressive the attackers have been, the defenders do need to be actually equally aggressive with their skirmishers. So the crossbow's in a good position, some bolts being wasted, but they're in a good enough position with good enough elevation to make this worthwhile. And there are, I mean, there's not really anything left reinforcements-wise. I think there's all of the bodyguard units for the dwarves and an axe guard unit. So Erebor are going to send forward their bodyguards as well to maybe act as the final hammer stroke over on this side, but I don't really know what to make of this. This could swing either way pretty quickly. Looks as though Angmar as well are actually having the desired effect in their advance against Rhun over here. Rhun's front line initially was doing quite well, but now with Angmar continuing to commit numbers across, they're able to keep up the pressure, and Rhun is starting to struggle a little bit under the weight of this attack. Rhun do have some of their units over helping Imladris out as well, so this isn't the full runic army, which is perhaps why they're struggling to marshal this front line against Angmar's full weight. Valakith Axguard taking damage. Rhun are being victorious in certain areas. The main problem may be the reinforcements from Mordor and Khazad. If Angmar can keep fighting down here, Rhun are not going to be able to retreat very quickly. Point blank arrow fire as well. Belagair archers doing their thing. The last of the Angmar units are making their way across now, including some fencers whose presence will be very appreciated. Continued push as well. The dwarves getting into this unit of Numenorian cohort. Most of them are 4th Legion Shield Guard, though the Hammers certainly have taken a fair few losses at this point. There's more dwarves making their way over here, systematically going through each pocket of resistance that the defenders have to offer. And there's more of Khazad over here, you have to say. Mordor have taken maybe the brunt of the casualties in this aggressive push against the Numenorian line, which will leave Khazad in a healthier spot later. Pretty much the truth over on the other side as well with regards to Erebor and Angmar's dynamic. So they're going to be relying in the late game on dwarven quality to see them across the line here. There's a few units still over there. Mordor with some Kummel's shadow bows firing away, firing into the blob of Mordor spears. Maybe better off going after the dwarves. I mean, the damage you're going to do initially is going to be fairly limited, but this has been actually quite a well-executed example of extreme aggression so far. This one we've chosen pushing through. The Naren Iron Royal Guard are here, but surely they're going to be overrun. The main question here is going to be just whether this can be sustained or not. Who is going to buckle under the strain first? Kharazim Swordmasters are going to rip their way through Corsair infantry pretty easily. Kummel's chosen another unit of very high quality too. Angmar are going to struggle a bit more now, I think. There's a few more aspects of Numenor's army down here. So if Angmar are going to play a part in the later game of this one, Mordor and Khazad are going to need to get a move on. Customers Rangers who, early on, based on their losses, I was worried for the attacks a little bit. Very gung-ho indeed. here. 4th Legion Shield Guard, is it? Ethereal Guard also making their way down here. I mean, a 3 hit point unit, the dwarves swallowing up any defenders that may have been left over here. I don't know what Rhun are going to be doing. Proxima Centauri surely sees Khazad on the way. Something is going to have to give. The Numenor Sentinels taking pretty much point-blank arrow fire from the Balagar archers here. Bodyguard as well, so all of this dwarven quality so far, you'd have to say, the quality-focused approach has worked, but it's in the late game where this could come back to bite them. If they don't have enough to sustain it, it will be based upon that. Several units of low-end orcs coming across the bridges as well, so that will add some much-needed numbers. Defenders actually very eager to continue fighting right from the front here. First Legion Pikes here, Numenorian cohort getting involved, but surely that's not going to be enough. I mean, Pharazim Swordmasters are such a strong unit, but they're going toe-to-toe with their fellow Titans here when it comes to Khazad-dûm's elite infantry. The double phalanx, thus far able to do a good job at holding Erebor at bay. Throwers and legionaries still pushing forward, but the layered nature of all of these archers is going to be taking its toll as well, you would suggest. As you set for archers of Rivendell, you know things are a little bit suspicious when you see such things in relation to some heavier units of infantry still present. Interesting and certain. Only a military genius could win this battle apparently. The guards of Khazad, or guardians of Kharndoom, I should say. Pushing a little bit too far into enemy lines. And again, it's archers of Rivendell. I suppose Elven archers are going to be slightly better at looking after themselves in melee, especially with that armour upgrade. They are going to retreat. They might still have ammunition, to be fair. Elven archers continue firing away. Angmar, much like Mordor on the other side, looking a little bit worse for wear, given the high-octane nature of the initial push. Moranal infantry pushing up the hill now as well. There's been no let-up so far. I imagine there is going to be a bit of a lull in the mid-game, purely because of how long the battle is. Moranal infantry are going to silence the runic missiles. I don't think they're going to be able to get away. The Eastron crossbows are just going to have to get into melee, but unfortunately Eastron crossbows, I mean, Narim are a little bit better in melee, but there's not many of them left. So the Moranal infantry should be outright victorious here. Mordor getting some good value off with their basic infantry. Always a worrying sign for the defenders in such a situation. Mordor still holding on so far, a combination of Numenor Sentinels and Numenorian cohort pinning the other aspects of the Mordor reinforcements that were on the way. Right through Rockdoor charging in, and I think that might have been the Angmar general, based on the positions of the Angmar bodyguard units. Sauron's will moving in. So let's go and have a look actually over there. Making good use of their cavalry though, the Gwaithir Rockdoor, to try and blunt the attacker's fangs. Was that the... hard to tell. Could it have been the Elven General, perhaps? It's a possibility. That would have been most unfortunate. Either way. Naruto Warriors, earning their keep in melee. This is one of the things that they are advertised as being good at. Again, they're going up against Erebor legionaries, so it's still a lopsided fight. I mean, they're better in melee than many archers, but they're still going up against a solid unit of Dwarven infantry here. Surely going to end relatively poorly. Gwaithir Rockdoor still trying to feast upon the scraps of these units, maybe killing off the The Iron for Axe Throwers isn't the worst idea. That's going to be a nasty charge as well. This is where things could start to come unstuck, actually. So far, we've seen the Blighty Rockboard been really causing some havoc among the attackers' ranks. If that continues, that's the sort of value that you need to get if you're going to run a unit of Lance Knights, but it's the sort of thing which is very often preventable from an attacking perspective. The unit of Erebor legionaries going to get trampled into the dirt, unfortunately for them. We're already starting to see the beginnings of a retreat to the hill at the back over there. That's one of the two choices, really, of final stands that the defenders have in TOL. The other one, of course, being this one over here. But this isn't really an option anymore, given the close proximity of Khazad to taking this hill. Once again, I think they were trying to retreat these crossbows, but they are going to be intercepted. And Legion Bodyguard will have an all too easy time dealing with these strong crossbowmen like this. We've got going on here, Khazad Reclaimers. Still plenty of Legion units. Mordor looking more battered and bruised, but still very much alive. 15 Narim. Just trying to do what damage they can before they're inevitably shot by Balagaio archers, which I think Umbar probably are the most wounded of all of the attackers, but then they were the ones that had to take on an aspect of this defence alone initially, so that is not too surprising. To be fair, Mordor are very thin on the ground as well. Units over here, but certainly the quality and the match-winning potential is bound up in Khazad over here, and more likely to be Erebor over on the other side as well, albeit I don't know how Erebor are going to deal with those Blighty Rockdoor if those hits continue to come forth. Go this way. This front line still holds, and Dragon Slayers of Arab Mithrin have been pushed forward, but you have to say, thus far, this attack, mostly Imladris, but with a little bit of runic support from Gamprim and Crossbowman up on the hills, they've done a very good job at halting the progress of Erebor and Angmar in their tracks, and now Highborns of Erebor taking charges from the Blighty Rockdoor in the background as well. Erebor's expertise is going to be needed to assist Khazad in the late game, you have to say. I'm still not seeing where so many more frames are coming from, to be honest with you, because this is looking... I mean, this is the final embers of this fight over here. The defenders are taking up a good defensive position over there, but that's usually when we're getting towards the final stages, unless there's an almighty phase where the attackers are simply organising themselves in the settlement. Got to be a little bit careful here. The Axe Guard of Erebor managing to charge into the Blighty Rockdoor, and the Blighty Rockdoor without a charge in response. Heavy Axemen are good against cavalry in melee. They don't have the same charge reflection that spears tend to have. So cavalry can still charge into them and be effective, but if they just sort of bump into them, heavy axemen are not going to be pretty good at dealing with them. Highborns of Erebor, line infantry a little bit less so. They've already taken a fair amount of damage here from the cav. Axra is now going to get ridden down as well. Elves caked in blood. How much of the defensive force over here is left? It's looking like nothing. Khazad managing to dispatch those Eastron crossbowmen very easily. The Narim have already been killed as well, so I mean, a very destructive fight indeed. All of the units that are going that way are routing, so I mean, it's not a huge force, you have to say, that remains. This is pretty much the remainder of the attacking army, plus a few units from Erebor, which may not actually arrive. Maybe a little bit of support over to assist Erebor in dismantling what remains of this defence, because these Blighty Rockdoor represented such a fantastic tool for supporting the front lines, and it's made... I mean, it's effectively stopped Erebor from being effective. No anti-cavalry around to carry the day. And I mean, 2nd Legion Axe Guard moving in to assist the Highborns. But again, we can see this little engagement here is the perfect advertisement, really, for pole arms, for phalanx units. Individually, with Dragon Slayers and with this much armor piercing, the Dwarves would under normal circumstances be victorious, Sons of Durin as well. But they've been held at bay for much, much longer than they would otherwise have been. They may still win this fight based on sheer quality, but they'll take far, far more losses than they would have been hoping for. And the Dwarves haven't been able to surround this front line and attack the pikes from the rear purely because of that cavalry support. Our warriors now retreating. Highborns are still getting systematically bullied. This is going to be surely another big charge. I mean, Swadian Born is... I don't think there's much you can really do in this situation, that was the thing. I mean, I think maybe trying to take cover among the buildings and try and use the map to your advantage, maybe just around a corner, is the best you could hope for, just to try and make the life of the cavalry just that little bit harder. But cycle charging in its purest form, really, you have to say. Balance of forces is even, which again is another sign of the equalising effect that pole arms can have. Umbar doing their thing, parking a unit of archers in front of the enemy and attempting to trade damage, or simply inflict damage in this case, because rightly, Imladris don't need to be wasting valuable Elder Enway archer arrows on such a basic unit of Umbar. At the back. This defensive position is pretty scary still. A lot of these units have seen combat, so they're going to be... Balagar archers in melee, not the finest. Dragon's Breath could really earn its keep here. I mean, this is... I don't know though, I think the angle that they're at, they're going to hit their own men if they decide to position themselves in that manner. However, Dragon's Wrath crossbows, very important unit in the late game here. With that dwarven quality, pure melee is definitely not how the defenders are going to win this from this point. Too many of their units are out of ammo skirmishers, or units that are already bloodied. So I think the Dragon's Wrath crossbowmen and the Dragon's Breath are going to be two keys to victory here, if the defenders are going to be successful. Maybe even the Whitey Rockdor still, to be honest with you. The Dwarves finally trying to force push their way through the front line, and it's finally having the desired effect, so Erebor will be involved in the final assault. The Dwarven-led affair will come to pass. Still, the Elven Cavalry is going to be picking off elements of the Erebor force where it can. Well, that wasn't a charge though, that was a bump. Like I said, this is where heavy axemen can be dangerous against cavalry. Sons of Durin making their way forwards. The Elven Cavalry may be better off just secreting itself away for the time being and waiting until the attackers are fully engrossed in making their push up the hill. There's no way that you're going to be able to chase that cavalry down, so there's no point in even trying. Diego has all of the power in terms of when to commit that cavalry, but the attack, as the attackers, you do have the power of choosing when he has to try and commit it. Putting pressure on this defense over here is the way to do that. Just making sure that you're aware of the cavalry. Wait. They did charge in again. Lances down. Yeah, that was a charge. They got up to charge speed there, so they are going to do some damage there to the Axe Guard of Erebor, some good damage as well. They lose a couple of riders for it, but they managed to kill off 10 or so Axe Guard. Given the value that the Elven Cavalry has already got, anything from this point on could be viewed as a bonus. Position. I mean, it's intimidating, I guess, when the defenders are so far above you, with artillery, with stuff like Dragon's Wrath crossbows. At this point, we're just seeing what can be achieved with... I'm just going to have to imagine the horses bounding over the fences and the low walls, but... They just lost their bottom there. We saw them coming. We're going to get a counter charge, and I guess with something as scary as the Sons of Durin, again, they thought they were going to charge in, but they decided not to. Now might be the time for a bit of times 2 speed, to be honest. I don't think the assault is going to get underway until Erebor arrive with what they have left, and this game of cat and mouse, there's only so much you can say about someone fainting with cavalry like this. It's not the worst idea, but the defenders aren't really gaining anything from it either at this point, because they're not, it's not as if they're denying reinforcements to an attack which is already underway. Khazad and Mordor and Angmar showing a good amount of restraint. Again, a nice charge there, that's a good charge. Killing off several more of the Axe Guard at the cost of only 1 rider. Given how close some battles can be, those are the margins by which things could be decided. How many of them are left? Only 6. Considering they're knights, that's still enough to do a decent amount of damage. This is the price of having no spears. How many spears left to their allies? I mean, I would be asking Mr. Vader to send across a 4th Legion, to be honest, just to help the situation. The 4th Legion a good opportunity to skewer and finish off rangers. Body piercing projectiles, even in that number, can really add up in terms of damage, so good little catch. Definitely the most efficient singular unit on the field so far, I think, has been the Elven Knights. The attack is underway now. I think we will be making pretty liberal use of times 2 speed from this point on in the battle anyway. Based on the fact that it is going to be a single choke point affair. Very different to the sweeping battle that it was in the first half. A battle of 2 halves, most certainly. Still, these Erebor units. They just need to get in and amongst their Khazad allies at this point. Because as it stands, they're just getting bullied out in the open field. I don't know if honestly these Axe Guard are going to make it, because charges like that will flying a little bit close to the sun there. Again, at the cost of only 1 rider, killing off a dozen or so Axe Guard. Further up. Arrow fire coming down, and I don't know necessarily that the defenders would want to be going after Balaguer archers like this, but maybe they feel as though they don't have much of a choice. Nazgul, the target of more arrows, only 5 of them left, so they must be bloodied and damaged. Are they going to go in on their own? They are. Under normal circumstances, Nazgul do much better with a lot of support, but it is only archers of Rivendell, I guess, making up this initial front line of Nazgul going about their grisly work. Wythy Rockdor biding their time now, waiting until later. Forward comes some Minas Morgul's Chosen, supporting the Nazgul that are already there. So Mordor once again taking the lead over here with pretty much everything they have left. So this is going to be pretty much Mordor's last contribution to this attack, just getting the ball rolling and then hoping that the dwarves can carry them through to victory. Still a long way left in this fight, isn't it? It is going to be a real slog to the top of this hill. One player admits defeat. Who's that? It's not Mordor. I don't think it's any of the defenders. It's not Numenor, it's not Rhun, it's not Imladris. It must be Angmar. Angmar or Angmar? Yeah, it's Angmar. Mordor is still here, both the Dwarven forces are still here, I think. Are both the Dwarven forces here? Surely it wasn't Erebor. Surely they weren't bullied that hard. No, yeah, Erebor's still here. So it is Angmar. Angmar are the ones that fall first. Dragon's Breath Cannon doing their thing. Trying to go after the Dwarven elites. taking cover behind the cliff. I mean, this is the great conundrum now for the attackers. In order to be effective on this front line, they're going to need quality, which so far Mordor is somewhat providing with units like Sauron's Will, the very depleted Nazgûl that were in here. Very depleted Temple Executioners, so Mordor all too happy to be the sacrificial lambs of the situation. But will the dwarves be as eager to fill that role? Namely Khazad, because they're the ones that have got the manpower left to really carry the attackers through. There goes the Umbar General. I don't think it's going to be too much of a concern. Umbar will be going the way of Angmar pretty soon, as will Mordor, I think. I mean, the level of quality of the units being tasked to hold the front line, Belagair archers, certainly not the last word in terms of quality. I mean, it could do worse, I suppose, but all of the defenders' hopes will be resting on ranged units of some description, be it artillery or arrows or bolts. Speaking of artillery, I think they were going after the Sons of Durin there, but again, the Dragon's Breath has got such a... As far as its trajectory goes, I mean, it's kind of like a ballista, but it seems to be less accurate than a ballista on pretty much every occasion I've seen it, so that's why it's good against walls. Walls are easy to hit. Moving units, a little bit less so. There are some moving units now, Sons of Durin on the front line, so extra quality. I mean, Elder Enway are coming in here to try and help hold the line, but the choice will need to be made at some stage to deploy, especially the Dragon's Wrath crossbows. That's going to be the kicker. Come shadow bows, look like they've got their swords drawn already. I mean, we saw them being used earlier on as it is. So I wouldn't be too shocked if they didn't have any ammunition left to them. Indeed, they are moving in now into melee. More useful in this situation than you would think, actually, as far as a melee combatant goes, because of the generally pretty high melee defense that Rangers have. They don't do an awful lot of damage in return, but for this kind of situation, they might be exactly what the defenders need. Fourth Legion Shield Guard on the way forward as well, just to keep the fires of this assault lit. Still 5 wide through Rokta. I mean, when things get really... when everything gets committed by the attackers, that's when the 5 riders could yet again prove their worth. It's still a fairly healthy unit of Scion Rim, which is probably the best bet the defenders have at holding a line. Between themselves and the Cardinals chosen, Rhun are going to have to be the ones to see the defenders over the line in much the same way Khazad are for the attackers, given what all of the relative combatants left have available to them. On the ground, there's still Nazgûl. One of them has fallen since last we saw them, but a few other units would have fared so well, to be honest, in the situation that they now find themselves in. Vicious. Dragon's Wrath Guildsmen revealing themselves. That's another unit that I didn't realise Rhun still had left. Their projectile's going to be very useful, scything through the 3 Nazgûl that remain. And they've also got very high melee defense, so other than the Orc Javelins, which still remain, they could prove to be an extremely useful unit for holding the line alongside the Scion. Again though, they are much more of a finesse-based unit, you would say, so this is where the armour of the dwarves is also going to come in handy, because the guildsmen will do less damage to them than they otherwise would. So we're doing a good job of holding the line. More reinforcements are needed. Rhun will start to wrest control of this front line away from the dwarves, given the number of Scion and guildsmen they have. Elite units are going to be required. And they're trying to, again, this is the thing, Khazad trying to conserve their bodyguard units, given how wanton aggression really helped the attackers early on. I'm surprised that they've now reverted back to type. I mean, the presence of those Dragon's Wrath crossbows is so dangerous that you can definitely understand why. but javelins coming in, immediately attracting the attention of the Rin. Not eager to have their front line whittled down by a unit like that. That is vicious. And yeah, the javelins rout as a result of the Rin and taking a square shot from the Dragon's Breath. And the Dragon's Breath needs to be attacking units as they move out. They can't afford to get friendly fire room. Hammers of Gundabad are moving in. More armor-piercing units, which will really put the Scion Rim under a lot of pressure. Hold the line for the time being, but themselves and the Guildsmen are under a lot of pressure now from the Hammers of Gundabad and the Sky and Erebor. Maybe the time has come to get those steel bows to the fight as well, just to keep things ticking over. Looks like the Rim are outlandish. I mean, something else in melee just to keep the defensive line in shape is what is called for. Victory is a distinct possibility. Steel bows, are they going to put themselves forward? I mean, there's worse units from a defending perspective to be targeted down by the Orc Javelins, I suppose. We wanted to use them as a sacrifice in that way. Rhune's infantry is continuing to struggle against the quality that the dwarves are able to bring to bear here. That was a volley from the Dragon's Wrath. They're going after the guards of Khazad, perchance? I mean, even if you're not taking full advantage of the body piercing, the crossbow bolts at this stage still represent your best bet at assassinating these high tier fallen units. Still got a full unit of Imladris Guardians, still got some Cummels chosen. The Dragon's Breath crew is actually worthwhile in melee as well. Steel bows are now going to get involved in melee. The supermarket own brand version of the Numenorian cohort that they are in melee, but it's better than nothing. And then the dwarves at bay, hoping to outlast them. Under normal circumstances that would be a fool's gambit, but I don't think there's much else that the defenders are going to be able to do here. Those Orc Javelins who return from routing. The Obsidian Guard. Were they being held back in reserve? I think perhaps they were. That's a significant unit to be able to bring out the back pocket for Erebor in the late game. And yeah, the cavalry once again making Erebor's life a misery. Although on this occasion I don't think there's much the cavalry can do in its current beleaguered state that's going to be able to stop the Obsidian Guard from making it to the hilltop. Very nice. Imladris Guardians now being committed to melee, seeing the fact that the dwarves are slowly but surely pushing them back in typical fashion. With the support of those javelins, I don't think they have anything left that can actually kill the javelins. The Dragon's Wrath crossbows at this point are probably going to need to be deployed. If all else fails, there's still a strong infantry unit you can try and use as room to then close out the battle, but if things continue the way they're going, I can only see the attackers eventually wearing the defenders down. Forward comes a unit of 2nd Legion, able to get in and around the defence. This could be a key moment in this battle. Another unit of Guildsmen. Not the worst thing to bring out either. Throwing projectiles. 2nd Legion struggling a little bit, but surely these Imladris Guardians are also struggling given the sandwich that they're now the meat in. More of those throwing projectiles being put to good use. Finally the Mordor general does fall. The Elven Riders making their way over here. Ready to get in the 1st Legion pikes though. And still Obsidian Guard. I mean, that's the only units that are not committed. So maybe the defenders still have a shot, but those are 2 units which, as a final gambit from an attacking perspective, those are the two units you would want. Maybe the dragons or the crossbows can still be the match winners, I don't know. Who's chosen still alive? The Gold Helene are a strong unit as well. And having a look at the percentages, the attacks are ahead by 2%. It's always very difficult for the defenders to recover things in the later stages in a 5v3 like this. So I'm not sure. Not sure whether they have it in them to actually do that. I think the Dragon's Breath is trying to get into a position where they can shoot down into this front line without fear of hitting their own men, but it's not going to happen. The position is simply not as it should be. They don't have ammunition by the looks of things. They don't necessarily need it. The arm piercing will certainly be of good help against the Carmels chosen and the God Helene should they be committed to melee. This is the part of the battle where you can tell everyone is just slamming their forces together, hoping that sheer might is going to be enough to see them across the line. Late game pikes them. Only a grazing hit on the Obsidian Guard. That's pretty unfortunate actually. The RNG-like fate that artillery will put you in. Custom Reclaimers and Obsidian Guard getting hit by the Dragon's Wrath crossbows, so no more reinforcements are going to arrive unscathed, but they will still arrive nonetheless. Well, looks like the crossbows are out of ammunition as well, pulling out their swords, so that I think is going to represent the final curtain call for the defenders, because you can see the First Legion pikes move on. I mean, I wouldn't necessarily force power through with the First Legion pikes. With the other units maybe I would, but the pikes are probably the only unit you would not want to do that. You want to use them as the anchor. The armor piercing damage coming into effect there. You can see Farazon is still alive actually. The one Numenorian steel bow that remains. Those custom reclaimers still have ammunition as well, so yeah, I think it's only a matter of time before we see the attackers claim ultimate victory in this one. A shame for the defenders, because I think in parts they've done really well. I mean, obviously that unit of Elven Cavalry was extremely well used, but I think maybe they weren't expecting the sheer aggression the attackers displayed early on, and their initial front lines were clearly not as efficient as they would have been had the attack been more of a slow burn. So I like this, because if the attackers do go on to win, it will represent, even when you have maybe a smaller attacking force and you've gone more for quality, it represents the idea that being really aggressive can still pay off, especially for defenders are just not expecting it. They're settling in for the long haul. And most of the length in this battle, I mean, we've gone ×2 speed for most of this single choke point fight, but most of the length in this battle would have been here at the final stand because of that. But by this point, the defenders were already in a bit of a hole. I don't think they're going to be able to dig their way out of it. I mean, if they do, it'll be based on the fact that the Dragon's Breath crew is actually far stronger in melee than most artillery crews, and the crossbows can also hold their own. I'd be really surprised though. I mean, surely the First Legion pikes are going to have what it takes. Maybe force power can improve and not play here. This is going to be very close actually. I am kind of rooting for the attackers to win based on the fact that it does show that extreme aggression is important, but by the same token, if they win by the kind of margin for defenders that it looks like they could, it shows just how important... Oh no, they're doing it. Didn't realise I still had these two units. I was about to say it would have shown how important the use of that cavalry was. That Gwythioroctor, but even that is not going to be enough to reverse their fortunes here. Difference, still 2%. between 2 and 3% is probably how it's going to end, so it's a very close battle on a classic map. I don't think the outcome's in too much doubt when you see 51 Mithril Guard make their way to the front line. You're in for a rough time if you're facing off against Khazad in that situation. Defeated distinct possibility, but it's super certain only a military genius could win this battle. It's not as if the defenders have played poorly, I just think they were not prepared for the savagery of those initial attacks. I think an unsung hero in this battle as well has actually been Angmar. Very few attackers on this map go for that route across those 3 bridges because it's going to be a painful experience, but I think you saw the upside of doing that here, because it certainly relieved the pressure a little bit more so on the Mordor Khazad assault, and I don't think Rhun was expecting it. They managed to do some good damage to Angmar in response to their assault, but it was damage Angmar was prepared to take, and probably expected to take as well. As we march towards the inevitable end of this battle, the dwarves very much in their element in this kind of fight, you'd have to say. Generals falling one after the other. And that there was... this is everything now. Everything that remains on the battlefield is in camera shot, but you'll notice more dwarves, and the dwarves are of higher quality anyway, so there can be no further doubts. Shield Guards still fighting hard. We are seeing the fact that the Dragon's Wrath and the Dragon's Wrath crossbows, despite not being infantry first and foremost, are pretty darn good in melee. Just so happens they're going up against really the best in the business in this kind of situation. And that is going to be that. Another entertaining battle. A battle of very differing things across the whole thing. Good skirmisher action, good cavalry action, a very wide sweeping first phase, the choke point grind that many sieges have in the second, and really everything in this battle. And this is what I mean when I say the TOL class, I think, has always been a very well designed map. Seeing another way in which this one can work out. Thanks mainly to Angmar, so I'll give a special thank you to Sankat for making this one a little bit different. And that is going to be that. 4% in the end, so the Dwarven dominance in the late game, they're really pulling through, but a well-fought battle, you would have to say, by all involved. Having a look at the kill counts, Numenor getting significantly less than their allies, but I feel as though that's as a result of being under extreme pressure and having to retreat through what was already enemy-occupied territory, so that's not really down to him especially. Obviously, Diego Villaramos, very good use of the cavalry, but the initial infantry lines that were set up, actually, were bullied by Angmar and Erebor. As much as they were able to turn things around and do a lot of damage in response to that initial assault, the defenders can afford those kind of losses far less than the attackers, and that did ultimately ring true. Rhun, of course, the ones that lasted the longest among the defenders. Like I said, I don't think they were expecting Angmar to push across those bridges so aggressively. They recovered from it pretty well, and they, of course, were the ones that were propping up the defence right into the late game, but in the end it was never going to be enough, given the quality that the Dwarves still had left. So you have to say, in spite of my initial protests in the army composition phases, the quality of the Dwarves was the thing which saw the attackers over the line, but it was still a risky thing to go so quality-centric in this battle and be this aggressive. It could have all gone wrong. If the defenders were expecting that level of assault, they would have been able to fortify their initial positions a little bit more so and utilise their skirmishes to good effect. But in the end, they weren't expecting it, and I guess that's the point, isn't it? The extreme aggression ended up bearing fruit, which I'm glad about. I'm glad the attackers won this one, because it shows, I think, that being aggressive, not sending your units in drips and drabs, and withholding the elite units, which is something that Certainly Mordor did not do, certainly Angmar did not do. Umbar couldn't do it because they had to send everything forward for that to work. It was really only the dwarves which maintained their quality at the back, and that was with the greater plan in mind anyway. It's when no elite units are on the front line that it bothers me, because it's only going to end one way in the vast majority of cases. But certainly a well executed, very aggressive assault there from the initial attackers, and then in the late game when it settled into a more of a grindy affair, they had that dwarven resilience that they needed. So let's see what did the damage for Winged Swordsman's Mordor army, which actually got a fair amount of kills. I mean, the Nazgul were a fixture throughout the battle. We only really saw them in that final push to the top. That's kind of the point. They blend in very easily. They're a very small unit, but if you can blend them into a bigger unit, they can end up getting a lot of kills for you. 276 is a good return for them. Temple Guard, 138. It's not bad. I mean, as an attacker, that's the sort of number that you would be happy to see. They are armor piercing and a very strong melee combatant. If you're on the defense, especially when you can dictate the engagement, they can get far more in terms of kills, but less so on this occasion. Temple Execution is just in behind, better in melee, of course, but they don't have that armor piercing. Sauron's Will did very well. Armor piercing damage, bearing fruit, and the rest getting under 100 kills, but that's not too surprising. I mean, Mordor, in the end, actually getting the most kills of all the attackers, but then they were also the first ones in, really, to initiate the assault, which is generally how you get the most kills as the attackers. If you hang back, you tend to get less kills, as evidenced really by Erebor, I suppose. The fact that they were maybe a little bit more conservative, but they were still alive in the late game, whereas Mordor, Angmar and Umbar were not. So the dwarves, the corrupted dwarves, are really the only ones left standing. So whatever riches were to be pilfered from TOL FALAS, they can now claim for their very own. And yeah, that's pretty much the narrative of this one. So big thank you to Winged Swordsman 44 for sending this one to me. Big thanks to all the players as well for being a part of this one. As for what's going to be coming up in the near future, another one from Winged Swordsman actually on a map which I think we have seen before. I have managed to download the map pack on the new PC now, so I will be able to get to those other ones. So the reason why TOL FALAS is occupying this spot is because at the time of recording this battle, I don't actually have the map pack downloaded, but by the time I know where it is and I've got it all downloaded on my PC, so I'll be able to unzip it and put it into the folder as it should be. I know what map it's on. It's one that we have seen before, but it was so long ago and on a previous version of the game that I don't think many of you will actually recognise it at this point. I was also sent one by the Womb Raider, which I believe is on the Temple of Melkor, another battle map which we haven't seen in an awfully long time, but definitely worthwhile in showing again, I think. So those will probably be the next two that we see. There is also a free-for-all that was sent to me by the Womb Raider as well, which I will also be getting to, just to break up all of the siege battles that we've been seeing of late. And then, moving into the further future, there is still a Silmarillion replay that I want to be getting to in the next month or so. One eye on the next patch, of course. Anything that they send me with regards to that immediately gets bumped to the front of the queue, so that's the sort of thing which I can't really speak about too far in advance, but hopefully we will see another example of the Rovanian siege, another new patch battle, soonish. And then as soon as it releases properly, of course, I can start getting into faction overviews and such again. And then, yeah, really just marching ever closer towards the end of the year, I guess. Yeah, big thanks to all the players once again. I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you'll join me for whatever is next.